The Pennsylvania Nightmare. Jonathan Ruckers was the quiet type, the one you wouldn't notice in a crowd. Born and raised in a small, nondescript town in Pennsylvania, his upbringing was largely uneventful. Nothing stood out about him as a child or as a young man, but, as it would turn out, that was the perfect camouflage for the monster he became. He worked at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital as a nurse. He was kind to his patients, with an unassuming demeanor and a genuine smile. In the sterile halls of the hospital, where people came to heal, no one could have imagined the darkness hiding beneath his calm exterior. Between 2008 and 2019, Jonathan Ruckers murdered 19 people. His victims came from different walks of life, men, women, and even children, each one meeting a terrifying and violent end. But it wasn't the body count that made Ruckers infamous. It was the methodology. Each kill was carefully orchestrated, uniquely grotesque, and terrifyingly personal. The early days of Jonathan Ruckers. Jonathan grew up in a strict household. His father, an ex-Marine, ruled with an iron fist, while his mother was more passive, often withdrawing into herself. As an only child, Jonathan learned early on how to wear masks, to be the good son, the good student, the good boy. But behind that facade, something was growing. Some believed his strict upbringing warped him. Others said that his quiet nature masked an innate sadism. Jonathan's interest in the human body started early. He was fascinated by anatomy and dissection, skills he would later hone as a nurse. His meticulous attention to detail and his steady hands made him a model student in nursing school. Colleagues described him as a professional and a dedicated caregiver. But Ruckers had a dark secret. He was obsessed with power, the power of life and death. The first murder, a cry in the dark. Jonathan's first victim was Emily Stevens, a fellow nurse who worked at the same hospital. She was found dead in her home in 2008, her body laid out on her bed as though she had died peacefully. But upon closer inspection, the medical examiner discovered that her death had been anything but serene. She had been sedated, then suffocated slowly, her airway deliberately blocked in a way that mimicked a natural death. Jonathan had learned exactly how to kill without leaving a trace from his years of medical training. The case went cold. To the police, it seemed like an accident, a tragic mistake. But for Ruckers, it was a thrilling success. He felt invincible, and the urge to kill again only grew stronger. The escalation, creativity in death. Over the years, Jonathan's methods evolved. With each kill, he became bolder, more creative. His victims were not random. He chose them carefully, stalking them for weeks, even months, learning their habits, weaknesses, and fears. By 2011, his body count had reached 6. Some were strangled in their sleep. Others were poisoned with undetectable chemicals. One man, David Lawson, was found hanging in his home, an apparent suicide except for the small, surgically precise incisions on his wrists, which suggested someone else had orchestrated his death. One victim, Julie Harper, was found with her tongue surgically removed, her body left in a bathtub, posed in a grotesque display of what investigators later described as ritualistic. Ruckers reveled in the terror he inflicted, carefully orchestrating each kill so that the public wouldn't suspect a pattern. The police were baffled, unable to link the murders despite the gruesome details. The decapitation, a family's horror. In 2015, Jonathan Ruckers reached the pinnacle of his violence. His victim was Robert Grayson, a well-known lawyer in the city. Grayson was a family man with 2 children and a loving wife. One evening, the Grayson family was preparing for dinner when Jonathan, disguised in a ski mask, broke into their home. What happened next would forever scar the Grayson family and shock Pennsylvania. Jonathan forced the family to watch as he methodically decapitated Robert with surgical precision. The screams of his wife and children echoed in the small suburban home, but Jonathan showed no emotion. He was calculated, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm as he held Robert's severed head in his hands, staring into the eyes of the horrified family before fleeing into the night. Despite the family's detailed description of the masked man, no leads surfaced. The brutality of the crime paralyzed the town with fear, and for a time, Jonathan went silent. The investigation, a killer unmasked. It wasn't until 2018 that authorities began to link the killings. An FBI profiler, Agent Lisa Carmichael, noticed the pattern. The precision, the lack of evidence, the escalating brutality. She realized that the killer wasn't just a sadist. He was someone with intimate knowledge of human anatomy and medicine. The clues pointed towards someone in the healthcare industry. Carmichael's investigation led her to Jonathan Ruckers, who had been present at or near the scenes of many of the murders, often as a first responder or hospital staff. But nothing directly tied High to the crimes, and he was known as a model employee at the hospital. The break came in 2019 when Ruckers made a critical mistake. His final victim, Kelly Adams, was found dead in her apartment from a lethal overdose of a medication only accessible to medical professionals. Ruckers had used his hospital credentials to acquire the drug, leaving a digital trail that led directly to him. The arrest and confession. When police arrested Jonathan at his home, they found a chilling array of souvenirs, from his victim's locks of hair personal items, even detailed journal entries describing the murders in graphic detail. The journals were filled with twisted fantasies and reflections on his kills, detailing how he had fooled everyone, how he had stayed hidden for so long. In a chilling confession, Jonathan admitted to all 19 murders. He showed no remorse, only a cold detachment as he described the killings in clinical detail. His reasoning was simple. He liked the feeling of control, of holding someone's life in his hands. It was never about the victims themselves. It was about the power. Jonathan Ruckers was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and the trial became a media sensation. His calm demeanor and lack of empathy during the proceedings unnerved everyone in the courtroom. People likened him to the most infamous serial killers in history, but there was something even darker about Jonathan, his ability to hide in plain sight for so long, and the way he had manipulated those around him. To this day, his name is whispered in fear in Pennsylvania, a state haunted by the quiet nurse who became one of the most prolific killers in American history. Legacy of fear. Years later, survivors and the families of the victims continue to grapple with the trauma. Some say they still wake up in cold sweats, haunted by the thought that someone like Jonathan Ruckers could exist in the world, so close, yet so invisible. His case serves as a chilling reminder. The most terrifying monsters aren't always the ones you can see. Sometimes they are the ones who walk among us, quiet, kind, and utterly unassuming. The legend of Jonathan Ruckers endures, cementing his legacy as one of the most terrifying and mysterious serial killers in recent history. A Pennsylvania nightmare that refuses to fade from memory.